Okay, so we're continuing with the verses from Nagarjuna. And this is an interesting verse in terms of looking at our mind, and oftentimes these point to our motivation, I think, for the different actions that we do. And this one says, by giving with deep thought, one gets rid of regret. And also that was expanded as regret and remorse. And so when they talk about deep thought in here, Venerable Children talked about with sincerity. And so this brings us back again to our motivation and the various actions that we do. And where I spent time in the past with this was particularly in looking at the 5 hindrances, and one of those is regret. And sometimes that one is explained as also remorse. And so I think we all have different experiences. And it's important, I think, to understand some things about regret. I believe, actually, although I tried to find this, but I didn't get it clearly, but I have the sense that there's a few different usages of the word. We use the word regret when we do our purification, and then we're thinking about it in, I think, a different way than this verse is. In this verse, it's maybe pointing to something that's a little bit of an affliction. It is an affliction, and it is disturbing to the mind. The regret that we use when we're purifying is actually an experience that it may be uncomfortable in some ways to recognize mistakes we've made and things that we've done, but we have a completely different mind state about it and a different energy. That's more of a, I made this mistake, I wish I hadn't. It has a positive direction to it in that you're moving in a way of maybe having more clarity. When I reflected on this verse, what I learned from this verse was and from the 5 hindrances, the one was about remorse. I found that in my experience. And I found that to be quite helpful because I think it helped to kind of clear this away a little bit and recognize remorse for what it is, and recognize it as for myself, as times when I kind of just felt badly about how I had interacted with another person or things that had happened in my life, and kind of dragging myself down a little bit with this kind of remorse. And then when I read this verse, it was like, it took me back to this need to clean up motivations and see what my motivations were. And so I think I haven't really experienced that as much from the time I spent, this was mostly 1.5 years ago or so or maybe 2 years ago that I worked with this a bit. And I've noticed since then that I am maybe spending more time looking at my motivations and trying to not create situations that I may have in the past. Because often previous in my life, I wasn't really examining my motivations very much. I was just living, having a good time and enjoying life. And we've talked about times where we go with the flow and we just kind of get swept into things. And then later on, you might have some regret and some remorse about those things. And regret in the sense of not such a positive one, maybe more like guilt. So if we think about this verse from Nagarjuna, it will help us to prevent these things from happening. So by giving with deep thought or sincerity or authenticity in a really clear way, by giving with deep thought, one gets rid of regret and remorse. So I hope this is beneficial, and that people remember that by doing these meditations, we clear ourselves of afflictions, and this leads us to nirvana, which is a liberation from these deluded states of mind.